Hello everyone, and welcome back once again to another edition to my One Piece journey. Today, in a brand new recording space, in a brand new apartment, new apartment, same old One Piece reviews though, I promise, we will be talking about the Long Ring Long Land arc. In addition to that, we're also going to be talking about the G-8 anime filler arc. People have different definitions for filler, that's what people sometimes refer to it as. I prefer to talk about it as anime exclusive, something like that. Either way, the G-8 arc, we're going to be talking about that a little bit, and we're also going to be talking about the Baron Omatsuri movie 6, both of which, the G8 arc and movie 6, both of which I watched right after finishing Skypiea due to requests from chat and people who are veterans of the series who said that would be a good time to get those out of the way, or just get those done, see how I like them, and maybe I could talk about them on the videos. I already talked about them very briefly on stream, and I will talk about them here, this video, because if you've read Long Ring Long Land or watched it, I think you understand why I don't have as much to say about this arc as I do for arcs like Alabasta or Skypiea. So we will be, in addition to that, talking very briefly, like I said, about those two parts of the series. Now, as always, if you want to get early access to the next video review, you can do so by subscribing to my Patreon account for the $5 patron tier. That will get you early access to the next video, which you can watch right now. If you would like to join in on the live read-throughs, you can follow me on Twitch, where every single chapter I will be reading live with a bunch of people in chat, and it's always a fun time, and you can join in if you'd like. Link to that is in the description and pinned comment. You can also check out my Discord server, where people talk about all sorts of stuff, not just One Piece, not just my streams, not just my videos. You know, there's a whole wealth of other stuff on there, so you can check that out if you'd like. It's a pretty fun community if I do say so myself, though I am a bit biased. But hey. But before we get into the proper review for everything I talked about, let's just get to some AJP's comments. These were commented on the video for Skypiea Part 1. Now, the first one is from Secret Turtle, who says, "The moment when the wolves dance with the crew is such an evocative panel of joy, togetherness, and simplicity. To howl at the moonlight with wolves and dance in the fire is such a primal act. It shows that the crew cares more about adventure and will always cherish the culture of the people and creatures in each island and won't convert their ideals into others. That the ideal of freedom and brotherhood is universal. Oda states that this was his favorite panel that he's drawn. I've had a few people tell me that it was his favorite. I've had a couple other people tell me that it was his third favorite. I don't know, either way it seems to be one of his favorite panels that he's ever drawn, or spreads that he's ever drawn, and I totally understand why. Like I mentioned in my Skypiea Part 1 video, that scene, spread, whatever you want to call it, is so encapsulating of everything that has to do with why Luffy and the crew pursue these adventures in the first place, what the reward is. You know, at the end of the journey, what will you have? What will you be able to say that we did together? What will the point be? These connections, this joy, this engagement with, connecting with people from all different cultures and understanding different perspectives and all this stuff. That is the heart of this. Whenever this adventure is done, when the crew are done their journey and Luffy is done being king of the pirates, if that ever happens, they'll look back on points like this as why their journey was worth it. That togetherness, that understanding and perspective, and it's one of the things that are most encapsulating of Skypiea as a whole. Perspective, right? Looking at things from a different point of view, seeing other people's perspectives, and engaging with that, and not rejecting that, and understanding one another. Because people, at heart, they really don't tend to be that different from one another, and connecting and seeing that, even though you may view things in a different way, seeing that the core of where you come from is very much alike, that can be extremely rewarding. And even if it isn't alike, it can be very rewarding to engage in that sort of thing. So anyway, I'm rambling, but I totally agree that that is one of the highlights of the series so far, and so beautiful. Time, or TM, says, "The way Oda tackles colonialism and oppression through Wiper, Enel, and Ganfall is incredibly sophisticated and extremely underrated. While the circumstances are obviously very different from real-life colonialism, the question being tackled is very much a real question, which is how does one make up for what their ancestors did? It's obvious that while Wiper is taking his agenda to an extreme, he's still in the right that just making peace while keeping Upper Yard holy ground will do nothing to help the Shandorians, or the Shandians. What they need is their homeland back, and not to live under the thumbs of the Skypieans, and regardless of Ganfer's good intentions, sorry I keep going back to the Viz translation for it, unless he can't offer proper reparations, Wiper won't accept it. Very much mirroring and criticizing cases of real-life colonialism, where the natives who got subjugated by people who considered themselves more cultured and considered it their holy duty to conquer far more often than not, never paid back a penny for their reckless and cruel destruction. Enel, very much like Crocodile before him, acts as the embodiment of that oppression, but simultaneously, Enel is a symptom of the Skypians deciding that the upper yard is holy and must be ruled by a god, in much the same way that Wiper is the embodiment of how desperation within oppressed groups can lead to radicalization. The entire conflict is just so well realized without Oda drawing your eye to it to show off or preach. He just puts the conflict there and lets the readers come to their own conclusions by coming along on the crew's journey. Once we follow the crew and make our own way to the end, who knows, we might reach a different conclusion than they will, and that's the magic of it. Oda doesn't put his themes in to challenge his protagonist. We all know Luffy doesn't care about the intricate politics of these matters, but if someone as simple as him can help these people out just by having the determination to help, then so can anyone reading the story. That last bit is one of the things I take away most from Skypiea. There are lots, like you mentioned, of allusions to colonialism, to Native American references, and visual allusions, cultural allusions. There are lots of things that are quite clear and things that are more subtle that people have talked to me about, and I always appreciate people pointing that out, just like this comment as well. So there's all that. And Oda is clearly read up on this sort of thing and baked it into the story in an organic way to reference that and inform some of the themes. But the thing is, Luffy is so independent from all of that. He just wants to have people dream. And the journey towards that dreaming, towards being able to help people to dream, encapsulates all of it. Encapsulates everyone's hopes and everyone's freedom and everyone's ideas of what they want out of life. And the fact that it encapsulates everything and integrates everything is so key to conveying an all-encompassing theme from which the subtle nuances can be taken, different things can be taken from the subtle nuances, like you said. So a lot of the things that I talked about for 4 hours about the Skypiea arc in my videos, lots of people I'm sure didn't think about themselves or find that interesting themselves, but the same can be said about other people and what they take away from it in contrast to what I take away. So, but what we will, at the end of the day, probably agree on is that Skypiea is this advocation of dreams, of idealism, of adventure. That is something we can agree on. That is pretty universal, just like Luffy is universal, and from there, any reader can take what they want from the little details, or the little references, or the cultural bits, or whatever. So I really do like that. I like that a ton. There are layers. There are things that are more in the forefront. There are things that kind of trickle down into the background from which any number of perspectives can draw any number of conclusions, and I really enjoy that. Joseph Davis says, one thing that I've always enjoyed about this series is the way even supporting characters still get a lot of distinct characterization. As you've expressed an appreciation for character writing, I'd like to ask about the major antagonist groups. Of the three you've read so far, Arlong's crew, Baroque Works, and Enel's vassals, not counting Arlong, Crocodile, and Enel themselves, which group did you like the best? What would you say you look for in an ideal group of henchmen, and do you think there might be better or worse ones in the future? So there are a few things to get to there. With the question of what do you look for in an ideal group of henchmen, there isn't any requirements, as is the case with all sorts of stories, all sorts of characters. Good is a universal thing, you know, it's very contextual. What works very well in a group of henchmen in One Piece would be totally different from a group of henchmen in Hunter x Hunter, and etc. There isn't anything I really look for. I just want them to be well written and ideally cohesive in some way, some sort of powerful thematics, but that can be done in any number of ways, so no real specifics, really. I just need it to be good, and there are so many ways in which villain henchman groups, antagonist groups can be written well, so no real requirements. That's kind of the beauty of storytelling for me. Do I think there might be better or worse ones in the future? I think there will be better ones, and I think there will also be worse ones. I think out of the groups we've seen so far, the three you've mentioned, they're sort of like middle of the road, I would imagine, for the series. For example, there are the Foxy Pirates, who I would say are worse than all three, and I imagine there will be better antagonist groups in the future. Just really well-written, really cohesive ones, really powerful ones, top to bottom. So I just get the feeling that it's sort of middle of the road for One Piece with those three, but I guess time will tell. And out of the three groups in which I like the best, honestly, I think I would say Arlong's group. I like Skypiea and Alabasta the best out of those three arcs. Those are the two my top 2 arcs, but Arlong's group is actually more interesting to me. It's more engaging to me. I think the way they interact with one another is just, it feels more integrative and substantial and deeply rooted, and it feels like there's more to it. You know, I liked what Baroque Works did for the world and the setting, and how it informed us about Crocodile. NL's vassals are okay. I didn't really buy into them too much, but something about Arlong's pirates, even if I don't think the individual characters themselves were super interesting, something about their group as a whole felt really cohesive and like their own sort of villainous family. I don't know, I really found myself attracted to Arlong's crew as an antagonist group, and I really hope there's more from them in the future, because there was a lot of untapped potential with regards to Arlong's characterization and how he viewed the world and how he viewed power and that brittle nature of his pride, if I'm remembering correctly, and how they responded to it. There was some interesting stuff there, so I'd like to see that explored, and even at the moment, with it unexplored, past what we've seen, I think they're my favorite. Brian Yaniro says, that panel of everyone partying around the bonfire is Oda's 3rd favorite panel ever. So yeah, some people are saying it's his 3rd favorite, some people saying his favorite, either way. In fact, he said he made the entire Skypiea story just so he could draw it. Also, did you realize Zoro can use long-range attacks now with his swords? And I'm not sure if you noticed, but the whole Zoro and Southbird interaction is extremely funny, or extra funny, because Zoro was lost with a literal compass following him. Not much to say here, except for pointing that out. For some reason I didn't even realize, yeah, like the most accurate form of a compass in the One Piece universe was following Zoro around, and he just consistently kept getting lost. Unbelievable. Thank you for pointing that out, that is hysterical. The next one is from Roxon, and I'm not going to read it out because it is quite a long comment, but I really wanted to draw attention to it and show appreciation for it. Thank you for sharing. What it essentially is Roxon watched the Skypiea arc in the anime and never really liked it, didn't really have much of a fondness for it, but then essentially showed appreciation for me going into depth about the things I really liked about each part of the arc and showing appreciation for that, and that's great. They say that it gave them a bit more of a new layer to the arc, a new layer of appreciation for it, seeing someone like me who really, really enjoyed it, and so that's great to see. That's something I really hope I can do with these videos, to some extent or another, just either to give you entertainment through seeing my views of the, and my opinions and my experience through the story, or to maybe give you a new layer of appreciation if I'm being a little greedy, like in this case. So I'm really glad, thank you for sharing with me, and thank you for everyone who tells me that these videos help them appreciate the story in a new way, because that's really very lovely to read, and it really helps me want to continue making these videos for sure. We've got 3 left, all of them I think pretty quick, just a few clarifying things. The first one is from Mr. JVT, who says, so I've noticed that you've been commenting a lot about the aesthetic of Skypiea. I know you're mainly focused on the manga, but have you watched any of the big scenes in the anime at all? If so, I'd love to hear your thoughts. There are certain parts of the series that the anime manages to bring to the next level. An example from an earlier arc is Dr. Hirolook's speech. Keep up the great work. So this is just an all-encompassing sort of thing I'm gonna say to you guys about my experience with the story. What happens is, I read every arc, and then I make mental and actual notes about the scenes that I really liked that I would like to see in the anime, and people in chat sometimes recommend scenes that I should see in the anime because they were done really well. So I read an arc, I make a list of that, sometimes it's just a couple scenes, sometimes it's up to 7 or 8, and I check them out once I'm done reading the arc, and I watch them, and I enjoy them. Some highlights have been some Drum Island stuff. Drum Island, I think, the bits I saw, was full of really cool adaptation stuff, really kneeling it home through some voice acting stuff and some directorial bits that I found were really effective and enhancing. There were some bits of Arlong Park that I enjoyed a lot as well, but the point I'm trying to get across here is I do watch clips from the anime, and there have been tons of people asking, please read or please watch the G-8 arc. I already answered that here, but yes, I always intended to watch it. It was just a matter of the timing. So yes, I do watch anime scenes, but I always wait until the end of each arc before watching a collection of the scenes within that arc. Second last one is from Anne. Really loving all your reviews so far. I just wanted to point out that Robin calling Luffy by name at this point, chapter 255, was a translation mistake. What she actually says is something like, What an amusing bunch of people. Do they want an accident to happen that badly? Viz translated it as, "You're so funny, Luffy. Are you that eager for danger?" It's very important for Robin's character that she doesn't call the Straw Hats by name, so I thought I should tell you. Keep up the great videos. Thank you. So that seems to be a very important correction. I was obviously, like you guys saw, I was making note of the fact that Robin only called people by their occupation, but the Luffy thing was a exception. It seems like Luffy wasn't an exception at all, and Viz kind of just botched the translation for that. So I will definitely pay attention to that going forward and assume or act as if Robin never said Luffy's name in the first place. And the last one from Anime. There's always tons of things to say about One Piece at every corner. Now about Gadatsu and his oblivious/forgetful side of himself, this is inspired by Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. When Gulliver goes to Laputa? An island in the sky sitting on clouds, he meets the people there who are kind of philosophers, having their minds always turned on some superior reflection. When one talks to Gulliver, the Laputian has one eye pointed at the man while the other eye is revulsed, like it's turned on its own mind, or his own mind. That Laputian can't seem to focus on Gulliver enough. In order to avoid this forgetfulness, there's a servant by his side at all times that wears a bag of stones. Regularly, he hits his master with a bag of stones to make him come back down on the moment. So you see this inspiration from Oda on Gadatsu, without of course doing a simple copy of Swift. Thought you would find this kind of detail that no one talks about interesting. Thank you. Yeah, not much to say about that, but I always appreciate when people give me context that Oda may have drawn from classic stories for some of his works, because for some of his characters, some of his concepts, whatever, because that's been happening a lot throughout, and I obviously miss a ton of it, so thank you. But that's it for all the AJP's comments for this video. Thank you so much for sending them in, and if you'd like them to be in a future video, just remember to use the same hashtag, AJPs. So, before getting into Long Ring Long Land, let's talk about those two animated bits I saw. Movie 6, Baron Omatsuri. Baron Omatsuri and the Secret Island is I think what it was called. This was a fantastic movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and obviously I'm not going to count it among the One Piece arcs when I do my arc rankings or whatever, but honestly it is a top 4 or 5 arc. Maybe top 3... maybe not, somewhere around there. I thought it was fantastic. It was directed by Mamoru Hosoda, and the direction is great. The character designs were interesting in that they were very kind of eclectic and rough in a very intentional way that I think contributed well to making things very fluid and flow well. The direction, the visuals, everything, it really hit hard. It shifts from very fun, very awesome interactions between the crew that were just, you know, just pure enjoyment and serotonin, to very dark, devastating, devilish, deathly imagery. It is gothic. There is some hellish nightmare fuel here, and the side cast was very surprisingly deep, not just the Baron and the Straw Hats, but also a lot of the Baron's crew, and a lot of the people just captured on the island, or tourists, the family. So it starts off really classically One Piece as they end up on this island that they just want to investigate, potentially go to this festival of sorts, and it's very fun as they get involved in all these hijinks and contests, and each crew member gets to show off a little bit, and there's some fun interactions for everyone. But then, as things start going wrong, as crewmates start disappearing, it delves deep into hellish, dark stuff, as Luffy is stripped bare and completely loses the reason why part of the reason why he adventures in the first place. Luffy is losing essentially a huge part of his life, through the risk of losing his crewmates, through what the Baron is doing. And so of course it's hellish, of course it's dark, of course it's just some of the most horrifying imagery that we've seen in the series, because this is one of the worst case scenarios. And I love the antagonist, the Baron, voiced beautifully by Akio Utsuka, or Otsuka, don't know how to pronounce his last name exactly, but one of my favorite voice actors who does Ryder from Fate Zero, Uvo from Hunter x Hunter, he's also plays Dimple in Mob Psycho 100, Thorkel, Vinland Saga, a bunch of awesome characters. He does a great job playing the Count. And we see someone who's a great foil to Luffy, someone who can't bear to lose his crewmates because they're everything he has, and who just sinks to the deepest depths to maintain this dream. It's this sort of dark inverse, almost a cautionary tale, in a character, personified by a character, of what happens when you lose these loved ones of yours, this nakama. It's horrifying, it's sad, it's thought-provoking, it's visceral, it's fun, it's everything. And it went darker than I thought One Piece could go, but I loved it, because it ascended. and it didn't lose sight of the identity that the series has. And honestly, up until this point, Baron Omatsuri is my favorite antagonist in One Piece, all of One Piece. Obviously, I'm not going to include him in my top characters because not part of the manga, which is whatever. It's different. It's the anime-only exclusive stuff. But if I did include him, just know he'd be my favorite antagonist, at least at this point. And then there's the G-8 arc. The G-8 anime-exclusive arc, 10 or 11 episodes, where we see the Straw Hats after Skypiea essentially infiltrate, somewhat unintentionally, a Navy base. This arc was lots of fun. It didn't get super dark or anything like Baron Omatsuri did, but I think what it does really well is it helps every crew member to shine in one way or another, to show these really empathetic sides to the crew once more as they connect with different characters throughout. My personal favorite was the Doctor. I think it's very effective in showing, we've talked before about the human side of the Navy, how there's people like Smoker and Tashigi for the other, the nameless entity that might be looked at as totally antagonistic. There's that human side, there's the everyman side of it. This is that once more in a lot of ways, as we see a lot of, just regular people from their perspective connecting with the crew in a lot of ways, who are just living their life. They're just doing their thing. And being dropped into their perspective and living with them for a bit is pretty eye-opening and nice. It actually takes a decent amount of time before we actually get the crew's point of view. Like, you're really eased into it slowly, and I like that because the additional cast for this are, solid enough to make you not be bored by them, and it again shows that human side to the Navy. After Skypiea, very dramatic, very extensive arc, this is a nice little bit of respite. Kind of the role that Long Ring Long Land has as an arc, structurally, tonally, is done through G8. Arguably a little better. So many things are in character, so many things are paced well, and in contrast to Skypiea in a really refreshing way. This is essentially how I think anime-only exclusive material should be done. There's some neat world-building details, some uses of prisms, some cool stuff. I will say that Sanji is probably at his most annoying here. I didn't really like him much in this arc, but hey, it wasn't too bad. He had hard eyes for half his screen time, but hey, it's alright. Robin had some really cool stuff. Robin was doing her thing. Nami I liked a lot as well. She was very take charge, very, carrying forth, I think, the authority she felt, or confidence she felt after Skypiea into this arc in a really effective way. And this arc also draws in on the value of the Going Merry sentimentally. It shows a nice little flashback montage of all the things that the crew has gone through with it, which I think is very sweet, because the Going Merry is pretty much a character as well, all that it's gone through. And this arc definitely takes some time to dwell upon that, and show us how it is an inclusive, integrated part of this adventure as well. And also, I would be amiss if I didn't mention that this arc also has one of the best shots of the entire series. Luffy looking up at the fortress in the night sky, lights all over the place. So yeah, G8 was very fun. Baron Omatsuri was great. So I'm glad I spent time watching both of those. Those are just my brief thoughts on them. Wasn't going to go, step by step on each of them, but I figured I'd give you guys a little taste of what I thought about each of them. Now, one more thing before we get into Long Ring Long Land. Some people have been asking me intermittently throughout this process so far about my thoughts on the art, comparing it from start to finish. Or start to where I am now. And before I've said that I can't really see much of a difference, but now I think I have enough context. We're 300 plus chapters in. I think we have enough context to really answer that properly, because I've gone back and looked at like chapter 1, chapter 2 stuff compared to chapter 300 stuff, and, there are definitely key differences. Essentially what it comes down to is, obviously Oda's just become a better artist, but even aside from that, there's more detail, there's more shading, there's more general stuff in each panel, there's more density in each panel. Whether it be just little lines of dialogue off to the side, or characters doing funny things or interacting in the background, or just the background art being really dense and well done, or there be dialogue or whatever. There is just more stuff in each panel, panel to panel, than there were in the beginning, where it was much more simple. But at the same time, if you go too far in that direction with making the panels too dense, too detailed, too rich, it could be a bit exhausting to read. It could be a bit stagnant in terms of flow. So I think Oda strikes a nice balance, around 300 chapters in, 320, whatever we're at, of giving us density and detail and richness and making it a full-blooded, enriching experience, but still allowing things to flow. The paneling flows better, the spreads, like I mentioned in Skypiea, are beautiful, some of the best art, and it's a nice balance between this density of information and density of art and simplicity and flow, because it doesn't lose track of that flow, and I never feel like I'm lost. I never feel like, you know, this is a bit exhausting. So I hope that Oda keeps this style, because I think going back to the simplicity would be losing a bit of the richness, but I think going a bit too far with that would lose some of the flow and the simple charm, I guess, of how the manga looks. So where it is right now is, I think, the perfect balance, and hopefully Oda just perfects this style. I'm speaking selfishly, perfects this sort of style because it's right up my alley in terms of manga. Also, little detail, people have been explaining to me the Devil Fruit categories. I've got it on lock now. The 3 categories, Zone, Paramythia, and Logia, and all the characteristics. I've got it in my notes, I've got it bookmarked, so thank you for everyone who explained the different categories of the devil fruits to me. Really appreciate it, because that is one of my weakest things, the logistics and details and mechanics of the devil fruits, so I appreciate it. So, Long Ring Long Land. This was an interesting arc. It is the type of arc I expected after Skypiea. After this huge, sprawling, epic, dramatic, emotional arc, you do need to calm things down a little bit with a shorter, more simple arc. I think for the readers, but I think for Oda himself, he spent weeks and weeks and I guess more than a year, probably years in the making, planning out Skypiea. So it must be exhausting to have to do that week to week. So I think it makes sense that he gave himself a little bit of a break through doing this simpler arc, and it makes sense that this was the structure of Long Ring Long Land. In terms of thematics though, there isn't a ton that I got, but there is some. One of the primary things I got was the value of the bonds between the crewmates and the connections they have with each other, and how important they are, and how you don't want to lose them. Which is interesting because it's very similar to Baron Omatsuri, one of the themes there. It's the possibility of losing it, and Luffy doing whatever he can to protect them in the end. It's a silly arc, it's a fun arc, but it definitely does fixate on that, and it really does get into the serious nature of that, which I was glad it did, because it's very silly, but I would have been disappointed if it didn't at least touch on the severity of what's at stake here, because it's a lot at stake, and it did, and that was good, and we'll get into that in a sec. In addition to that, though, there was the theme of, I guess, pragmatism, sort of dirty, underhanded pragmatism being needed to survive on the Grand Line, because Foxy's pirates, everything they do is cheating, you know? They go out of their way to cheat to get crewmates, and that is how they gain their, they build their mini-empire, or whatever you want to call it, and interestingly enough, Luffy responds, this is pointed out to me in chat, Luffy responds by beating him in a little bit of an underhanded way as well. So I think it's a little bit of a commentary on the pragmatism and know-how that's needed, and maturity and experience that's needed on the Grand Line. You can't do everything neat and cookie-cutter and honorable. You have to be a little bit dirty, you have to be a little bit conniving to make it. That's just how it is, that's just how this setting works. So those were a couple of the themes I got, and then it leads into the Aokiji stuff, and my god, the stuff with him, with Robin, the hook into the next arc, unbelievable. So this video, like I said, is going to be a bit shorter, because I don't have much to say about it. A lot of the stretches of chapters are taken up by commentary of the commentator who was talking about the action at the moment, and you guys know, I don't tend to talk much about the beat-by-beat fights in the series, and a lot of this arc is action. So I just don't have much to say about some of the stretches of chapters, but I do have some things to say, like I said. And Foxy himself, as an antagonist, he reminds me a bit of Wapol. He isn't as well written functionally as Wapol, but he is interesting in that he's, like I said, a look into that pragmatism, a look into that underhandedness. Very silly, very over the top. He isn't my sort of antagonist, but he did offer some interesting insight into the world through that, and also to the introduction of the Davy Back contest, which I think is a cool little cultural bit of world building. He's goofy, he's cruel, he's pretty shallow, but, you know, he does the job that he needs to do, and not every antagonist, not every character is going to be super rich and four-dimensional. Overall, this arc definitely wasn't one of my favorites. It wasn't the best arc. It's one of my least favorites, actually. And I know I use this word a lot, but it's probably the thinnest arc so far. It reminds me of Whiskey Peak, but I think even less plot substance than there was there, but at the same time, I understand why an arc of this style was needed. Could it have been improved upon? For sure. There was a lot of times where the silliness just got a bit, I was just like, okay, this is fun, but I would like something a bit more substantial, or a bit, this is dragging on a bit, maybe. But hey, at the end of the day, something like this was needed tonally. It's refreshing. It's a sort of a reset and a pivot, and there are some nice interactions with the crew, there's some funny moments, and it's good for the tone. And then quickly, last thing with regards to the cover stories, Ace continues his search for Blackbeard. It ends. The final volume happens here and it ends. And then there's a cover story introduced for Gidatsu, who essentially falls out of Skypiea onto an island full of holes, wonder how they got there, and decides that he wants to become a boss of the Blue Sea, and starts to learn how it is to live on this land. So that's really cool, we'll see how that progresses. But with regards to the actual arc and how it starts off, the crew are chased by a bunch of sea monkeys, and they eventually run into another ship, and they realize that they look very dejected. All the crew on the ship look very dejected, they look aimless, they don't really know what they're doing, they're disorganized, and Usopp spots them. He says they aren't like a real crew. He says he has a bad feeling about this. And it's interesting to see the contrast between our crew and this crew, seeing them so dejected, so directionless, so aimless, and no spirit or soul or passion or dreams. So they're just like the anti-Straw Hats. So it's really cool that Usopp's able to see here, yeah, this is not even a crew. And I like that he makes that observation. A really cute moment through the first chapter is Robin sees an island. She says that she found the island, and Luffy tells her, be more enthusiastic. And Robin has up until this point been someone who's a bit more passive, a bit more introverted, a bit on the outskirts like we've talked about before. But what I like here is that Luffy invites her to engage more, and she's receptive to it. She doesn't feel forced. She kind of takes it with a smile and goes, okay, I'll try. I'll try to do that, and I'm open to it. And it's just a nice little cute interaction and shows how Luffy's helping her come out of her shell a little bit. But after seeing that crew, after seeing the land, they weigh anchor at this island, and it seems very sparse, kind of just grassland. And Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper go to explore, and they quickly just find a bunch of stretched out, long, narrow animals just vibing all over the damn place. And you can very clearly see right away where the name comes from. There are some super tall trees too, and Luffy breaks some bamboo, and all of a sudden, an elderly man seems to sprout out from nowhere. This confused me at first. Then a ship appears, boxing the other members of the crew in outside of Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper, and demanding that they have some sort of duel. They say that they're the Foxy Pirates and they want a duel. It's then explained to us that the old man we see, who came out of the bamboo, was actually riding the bamboo as stilts. His name is Tonjit, and he was up there for 10 years, scared to come down, but the longer he stayed up there, the longer the stilts grew, and so, he couldn't come down. It's revealed that he's the owner of a horse named Shelly, which is one that Chopper sort of befriended earlier, and then there's some wild exchanges. There's a bunch of puns about the long nature of the island, stretching words out. The horses, for example, that exist on this island are called horses because it's long. I found it pretty funny. Chad was having fun with it as well. But the explanation for this seems to be, Tanja just says this is a land where people like to live large, so they're stretched out. A very gross but funny detail is Tonjit invites them into his house and says, you want some milk as a refreshment? It's curdled into some gross-looking cheese after the 10 years. He has literally been outside for a decade, so yeah, I wouldn't accept that from him. Neither did the crew. He eats it, he passes out. It's a pretty humorous encounter, he's very silly. But then he explains the details of this island, Long Ring Long Land, or Long Ring Island. And what it essentially is it's a ring of 10 islands. They're in a circle, but once every 3 years when the tide is low, you see that it's actually one landmass with just the islands jutting out from it. And when that happens, Tonjit's village migrate to the next island. It's really cool. It's very creative. I like the detail of the tides being integrated. I like the detail of the villages and what they do culturally, or I guess it was a singular village. But Tonjit got left behind, and he won't see them for decades. And Luffy says, won't you get lonely? Which was a very nice thing for him to say there, very empathetic as someone who, has amassed this beautiful group of friends. Luffy thinking of someone else getting lonely is just very in character. Very soon, though, he reunites with Sherry, his horse, and it's a very touching scene. Sherry had had foregone the other villagers who told her to leave her master to wait for Tanjit, and he recounts their times together. He says, you waited for me in the rain, in the snow, whatever, and it's quite beautiful. But then she's shot. I was shocked when I saw this. She is literally shot. It ends up being a non-fatal leg wound, but the moment itself is very shocking, very jarring. The crew are enraged, Luffy is irate, Tanjit obviously very worried, and what happens is a man named Foxy shot her, with his subordinates, Porsche and Hamburg. And he has this gag with getting dejected when people don't recognize him, things similar to that, so that starts being introduced here. And essentially he says to Luffy, I want to fight you, or duel you in a Davy back contest, with orthodox rules. Luffy goes, hell yeah, let's do it, not knowing what it even is. And Usopp realizes what it is, and says do not accept it, otherwise we'll lose our comrades or companions. So Fox's introduction is very simple, very to the point. There are lots of great reasons for why he's unlikable, and it's not very extensive or super rich or anything, but like I said, it didn't really need to be. So Usopp tells Luffy don't do it, not to accept this challenge, and Luffy, Foxy's a bit sly here and tells Luffy, oh, are you gonna be scared? Or he challenges his courage. And so Luffy, that had him hook, line, and sinker. And in the meantime, he tells Tanjit to stay back because they're dangerous pirates. And we get an explanation about what a Davy back fight is. What it essentially is it's a fight between crews. And the reward is that you can steal crew members from one another. So what had happened is that this group, the Foxy Pirates, had stolen crew members from the dejected-looking crew from the beginning. They'd stolen their navigator, their captain, their cook, whatever. And so you take the members from the crew, and if you don't want the crew members, you can strip them of their Jolly Roger. So in response to this, Nami is terrified. Robin is kind of unmoved, which is kind of what you'd expect from her, I guess. But Nami, she is absolutely terrified. Sanji and Zoro are kind of like accepting of it. They're like, this is a challenge, whatever. They're confident. But Nami, again, nice focus on her. Again, not super confident in their ability to succeed, or rather fear overpowering that a little bit. And it's notable that Usopp and Nami both said, we cannot do this. The two most everyman members of the crew, I'd say. But going back to Nami especially, she has found a home here with the crew, and she does not want to lose this at all. It would be the end of the world to her. This is her everything. And so I really like that she's struck by fear so much in response to the idea of losing this. And Robin called Nami by her name here, saying that men, you can't change men's minds, etc. I assume that's maybe a Viz mistranslation as well. It's hard for me to tell, but I'm gonna assume that. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know when Robin's actual calling them of their names is supposed to count. And so the crew minus Nami are all down for this. Luffy is telling Usopp, don't fear, it'll be fine because we have to lose. So he doesn't think that he'll lose his crewmates, and he's confident, as he always has been, but he's also enraged because of what happened with Sherry, so his judgment's a little impaired. So the crews get together, they get ready this ceremony where they're going to get together and fight one another and duel, and Nami and Usopp continue to be scared. Love that for them. The rest of everyone else seems to be pretty confident, pretty up for the challenge. And then some details are given to us. This is done in honor of Davy Jones, this Davy back contest. He's said to have been cursed by a demon, sleeps on the seafloor. Sunken ships or treasure get taken to his locker, and so taking things from enemies is referred to as Davy back. And so the Straw Hats are divided into three groups over 3 rounds of contests. The first group was the donut race with Usopp, Robin, and Nami, and then in the round 2 it would be Chopper, Zoro, and Sanji in the Groggy Ring, and round 3 is single combat with Luffy versus Foxy. And some funny little details is, for the first contest with Usopp, Robin, and Nami, everyone's going, oh, I want one of the girls, and no one wants Usopp. My poor guy. The contest begins, and so like I said, I don't have much to say about the play-by-play of what happens within them, but I do like that they highlight certain things about each crewmate, each member. Like here for one, I like how it complements each of their talents. Someone in chat pointed this out to me. Robin uses her fruits in really interesting and clever ways, her devil fruit power, Usopp uses his smarts and resourcefulness to use dials to navigate this race, and some self-sacrifice as well. That's very Usopp. And Nami is, like, very much directing things like a navigator. So this is basically a race around the island. Foxy ends up being very cringe and, very over the top and disrupting them and cheating, which, keys you into the pragmatism like I was talking about before. The refs are dirty too, it's very unfair, and ultimately by the end, the crew lose by the skin of their teeth, as Foxy uses his slow fruit to slow them down right at the end, essentially just causing all particles or all beings in this area to slow down completely. Pretty cool power, gotta say. But so the crew lose, which means that Foxy can pick anyone he wants from Luffy's crew to take onto his own crew, and he picks Chopper. And it's so sad knowing where Chopper comes from, knowing the home that he's now found, and that it's being stripped away from him potentially in this moment. It's extremely sad knowing where he came from, how this is the first place that accepted him properly, all the Drum Island stuff. And he just came into his own as a part of the crew, and now it's being taken away, which is devastating. I do have to admit there is some humor applied to this moment that I didn't really like. I don't think the tone was right, because this is a heartbreaking moment. I don't think humor really applies here. Even if they're confident, even if it's a low-stakes arc, even if it's a comical arc, I just don't think humor should be used in a situation where Chopper's heart is being torn out, It didn't really sit well with me. But then there's a really lovely moment with Zoro and Chopper, as Chopper is crying his eyes out, and Zoro tells him, stop crying. He says that he made the choice to become a pirate, he made the choice to enter this contest, and so you have to have conviction and accept the consequences. And that's what he agreed to, so stop crying because this is what you agreed to, and get a hold of yourself because there is still plenty of time to be played. We can still win you back, essentially is the subtext there. He says, if you're a man, see this through to the end. And Chopper stops crying. It was a great scene, a great moment between Zoro and Chopper. And Chopper wipes away his tears, and Zoro says that's better. And so obviously he's talking about the pirate conviction. Having conviction, having principles. Zoro's a big advocate of that, and Chopper, he has to back himself up. He has to stand up for what he agreed to in the first place. But he's also offering comfort in saying, we're about to play and we can win you back, because him and Sanji play next. But Chopper was a part of their team and there are no subs allowed. So it's just him and Sanji versus 3 huge gigantic people in this groggy ring game. They face off against these 3 gigantic things, men, one's half fishmen, and so it's the 2 monsters against these 3 monsters. And they essentially just say, bring it on. So the second game starts, and, I thought it would be really easy for Zoro and Sanji for some reason. That's just the feeling I got. It really wasn't. They kind of struggled a little bit, which is good. They had a challenge, and as they should have. The Foxy Pirates, they're silly, they're over the top, but they are experts at this sort of thing. And it was 3 versus 2, and they were huge. It was drawn really well, this whole groggy battle, and I think it flowed well, and this is probably my favorite of the 3 bouts. Zoro and Sanji face some obstacles like I kind of alluded to, one of them being each other as they fight and bicker a lot. Essentially, one of them has to be a ball, who is then going to be scored, or used to score. Zoro forces Sanji to be the ball. Sanji almost gets used to score with, on, whatever, however you word that, and Zoro saves him from going in the net, which would cause them to lose, but Sanji gets upset, saying, don't help me, and then Zoro says, then don't require my help. It's a fun back and forth. It's kind of adorable as much as it is raw. The biased commentary was quite funny. The ref continues to be bad, Sanji kicks him, and eventually the 2, they struggle in this fight, and they look to be defeated, but what ends up happening is they just kind of get with it, and they go, all right, let's flick the switch and let's do it. The 2 are laying down next to each other, bloodied up, beat up, and Zoro says, lend me a hand for 10 seconds, Cook. Sanji says, sure, that should be enough time. And shit is going down when they do that. They get up, the shadows are over their eyes, it's go time. The fight, I can't possibly describe the fight. It is all over the place, it's crazy, but it was very entertaining and I enjoyed it, and they ultimately end up winning. There's a great spread as Zoro beats down one of the huge guys, and Sanji has a nice little smile, a little smirk in reaction. I really do like the Sanji-Zoro dynamic, and I thought it was great here. It's nice to see them working together, bickering, but then working together and coming together to rescue their crewmate, and because they win, they're able to get Chopper back. And it's funny because some of the opposition crew wonder if Luffy's going to choose them Sorry to break it to you. They are looking for a carpenter, though. Like, that's been their goal for a little while now, to get a carpenter to fix up the Going Merry. So that was something that was kind of like dangled in front of us throughout this arc. The crew need a carpenter, so if there was a carpenter there, that would have been an option if Chopper wasn't kidnapped. But Chopper's back, he's crying, tears of joy, it's very lovely, and Luffy just goes, of course they won. He's very proud of his crew, it's a very sweet moment. And another deceptively cute moment as well is Sanji does his hard eyes thing for Nami, and she kind of like dismisses him or whatever, and then he does it for Robin, and he's going, I did good, right, Robin? I did well, right, Robin? And she goes, you were very cool. She just smiles at him and goes, yes, you were very cool. And something about her indulging Sanji in that way was kind of very endearing and adorable to me. She's indulging him, she's receptive, not receptive maybe, but she's playing along with it and going, yes, you were very impressive. It was very sweet, it was very cute. I liked that from Robin. Nami then uses some big brain strats where she goes, hey listen, we won this, so get their captain. Their captain's the only one fighting in the single fight bouts. Then Luffy would win by default, without any risk of loss. Then they'll win the next match and they'll get Chopper back regardless. And the crowd's deriding her. I'm on her side. You gotta think pragmatically. You gotta do this. It's a bit rich of them to go, oh, you're going against the honor of the duel with all that they did. Not the crew, the crowd and the ref and the other pirates. So I was Team Nami. And some of the teammates are against her as well, like I said. I think Zoro and Sanji were, because they're like, no, that's a win without honor, all that. And then Nami cries into Robin, going, why don't they do it? And Robin going, I don't know, I'm with you, which I love, differing perspectives within the crew. Usopp agrees with her as well, which varying character. It's great, all these different perspectives, all these different ways of thinking about what it means to win this fight, about honor, about everything. Oda is very clearly self-aware of the silliness or heart-over-headness of some of these ideals at times, and uses it in showing these differing perspectives. There isn't a right way, quote-unquote, to live. There are just different ways. People are different. Nami's different. Usopp's different. But then Robin kind of says to her, wait, if we do that plan, the captain would have to be on our crew. Foxy would have to be on our crew. And they go, oh, hell no. So maybe not as big-brained as I initially thought. There's a beautiful little scene where Chopper thanks Zoro and Sanji for saving him. It's very lovely. It's one of my favorite moments in the entire arc. It's just really, really sweet. And then round 3 single combat begins. They fight on the Sexy Foxy, which is their ship. Luffy gets ready for battle, and Usopp says he'll be his cornerman. It's this big event. Things are sold all over. There's attractions. There's the crowd gathering. Announcements, there's hype. And then when they come out for battle, Luffy is for some reason wearing an afro. He's wearing an afro. And Usopp is looking really cool. He's got some glasses. He's wearing Luffy's hat, which is a nice touch, entrusting it to him. And this was very bizarre. I was about to stop reading on stream. Like I said, okay, guys, one more. And then I read this. And then this happened, and I said, okay, I gotta see what happens after this. Like, what the hell is going on? Afro Luffy? We then see a flashback in the locker room where Usopp tells Luffy, wear this afro, like there's a spare afro lying around. So Usopp tells him this afro will make him stronger, and he says, do champions wear afros or do afros wear champions? And this inspires Luffy. And it's very silly, it is what it is, but I think it's actually kind of cool that Usopp is able to inspire Luffy here, whereas in the past, Luffy has been the one consistently inspiring Usopp, so it's a nice little reversal. But it changes the way he talks, and Luffy starts going, oh yeah. And there's the obvious cultural stuff here. I'm not African American, I'm not black, so I wasn't coming from a perspective where I knew if this was offensive or not. And so I asked people in chat, for anyone for whom this applies to, how do you feel about this? Most people just said, it's pretty hilarious. Like, no one really had much of a problem with that, but I'm curious. If anyone thinks differently in the comments or watching this video, please do share. But they start fighting, the fight starts, Foxy starts using his slow power in a really cool way. Some interesting, genuinely clever utility of it. He manipulates some cannonballs, there's a 30-second timer for them, there's a stop-start aspect to it. Luffy's really confused and discombobulated. And it's just bizarre. This whole thing's bizarre. Luffy fighting with an afro is bizarre. It's very weird, but hey, it's the tone that like I said, was probably appropriate for this point. Luffy chases him around the ship, Foxy wears some masks, and Luffy somehow doesn't realize it's him. There is all this hijinks, there's some very Scooby-Doo-esque, over-the-top stuff. But then, in the midst of the silliness, there's the moment I referred to before, where Luffy, he's essentially fighting to keep his crew together, to keep his friends, his nakama together. And so, this is the moment where it really hits him. And in the midst of all this difficulty, he says, I am not losing a single member of this crew, even if it kills me. He keeps getting back on his feet, he keeps persevering. And I love that. I really wanted there to be this big weighty moment, because the silliness is great, but at the end of the day, he is fighting for something irreplaceable. The stakes are super high, and at the end of the day, it's his fault, accepting this challenge, that they're at risk in the first place, so he has to take responsibility, and he does. But everyone in the crowd starts cheering for Luffy. It feels very meta in a way. It feels very self-aware. As the crowd, Foxy's crew, the crowd, Luffy's crew, everyone's cheering for Luffy as he kind of sweeps people up like he tends to do. And in the midst of the fight, as Luffy is struggling, Nami, who earlier didn't want to lose anything from this crew, says, you don't have to go this far, Luffy. You don't have to go this far, even if it risks losing crewmates. So that says something with regards to how much she feels for Luffy in this moment, because we know where she's coming from. She doesn't want to lose this family. But at the same time, Luffy is going tooth and nail, to the death almost, to protect this. And she really realizes that. But Luffy's determined. He takes responsibility and leadership and corrects his mistake. And whether it's a mistake, that depends on who you ask, because he does win in the end. So is it really a mistake? It really depends. It depends on your point of view. But at the end of the day, Luffy ultimately wins. Foxy falls overboard. The crew celebrates. Robin has this great smile. Nami cheers. Usopp cheers. It's very lovely. And it was pointed out to me by Algie, a chatter, that just as Luffy was a hard counter to Enel, being rubber to his electricity, Foxy was like a hard counter to Luffy, being underhanded and dishonest, whereas Luffy always expects people to be honest. Or not always, but, he expects principles. He was a little desperate, he was impulsive, he was rattled, he was compromised, but he persisted, and despite the difficulties, despite the hard counter, he won back his friends, the people for whom he does all of this in the first place. And Foxy asks him what I feel it gets asked to him a lot of the time, which is, where do you get your strength from? It's that inner need, that thirst for, the pirate spirit, to seek out your dreams, for that freedom, but also that connection with those people you care for. And that is one of the main themes of this arc, I think. And Luffy wins, he screams with joy. It really shows what it means to him. And he's kind of drifting in and out of consciousness, but Zoro ultimately tells him that he won, and there's this huge grin. It's really beautiful, and it shows what it means to him at the end of the day. And Nami looks really fondly at him. She kind of just looks at him like, you can tell how much she cares for him in that panel. It's really great. And there's a reaction from each crew member, the classic Oda thing, where you see a snap of each crew member and how they respond, and every single one was awesome. Foxy tries to do him dirty with a dirty handshake or a fake handshake. Luffy ultimately asks him to give up his Jolly Roger, and Sanji asks him about it. He says, are you sure you don't want a carpenter? And Luffy says, if I actually get what I want with this, then I'll forget why I accepted the fight in the first place. And Luffy ends up drawing over his old Jolly Roger, Foxy's old Jolly Roger, and giving him a new one, so he can still sail. The Foxy Jolly Roger, very roughly drawn. And the Foxy pirates yell to Luffy that they'll remember this, and they go off on their own merry way. But Luffy returns to Tanjit, and he tells Tanjit, the pirates won't be a problem anymore. And we see here that this is a big crux of why he was fighting them as well, to protect Tanjit from the pirates who have hurt Sherry. And Nami says that herself, that's why you accepted. There were other reasons, but that was part of it. And they get to Tanjit's house for some refreshments or to rest up, and a man is waiting for them there. He's sleeping there, leaning against the house. And he has a mask on, and he pulls it off, and Robin recognizes him, and he her, and he says she's grown into a beautiful woman, and this is Admiral Aokiji. He's back. What does he want, though? When we first saw him, he seemed fixated on Luffy. He was looking at a poster of Luffy and saying that this whole family, there's some deal with this whole family, so he seemed fixated on Luffy, but now he seems to have some connection with Robin. He continues with this. He says that he and Robin go way back, and Robin is visibly distressed. She is very taken aback by this. She falls over, and we have never seen Robin like this. This is something totally unique, and it really makes you wonder who this guy is, what he's talking about, Robin's past, what's going on, because she has never been this rattled. But the crew, in response to this, which I love, it shows their fellowship, immediately get ready to defend her, to attack Aokiji for her, as they see that she's scared. I think Usopp does it, I think Sanji does it, and I think Zoro do it. I think most of the crew do it, or like are ready to do it, but those are the ones we see. They have her back and they'll protect her. And Aokiji says he was just taking a stroll, he doesn't intend to do anything. And Robin says that he's from the Navy and he's an admiral. And she says that there are only 3 of them in the Navy. Him, Akainu, and Kizaru. And the only one above them is the Fleet Admiral Sengoku, commander of the Navy. And his motto, Aokiji's motto in the Navy, is lazy justice. And he's an interesting personality. He's very laid back and lazy, like it's kind of alluded to, but at the snap of a finger, he can turn extremely menacing, extremely dark and threatening, and just volatile. He's scary. He reminds me in that way a little bit of Lalo from Better Call Saul, and he is fully able to back himself up. So he has this past with Robin, and he says that he's here to check on their crew, because they have a guy with 100 million bounty, a 60 million, and Robin 79. That adds up, and they're pretty notorious as a result. And Luffy starts to try to defend Robin, but Aokiji says he's not here to take her. And he then says that he can help Tanjiro with his problem. He heard that he had to go to another island across the big landmass to catch up with his village, and he says, I can help you with that. Aokiji swirls his hand around in the water, and a big Sea King comes out of nowhere, and then he freezes the Sea King, freezes the sea, and makes it so that Tanjiro can travel with Sherry across. And that power, iconic imagery. Freezing the Sea King in the middle of that, amazing image. And it's kind of nice. Tanjiro's able to do that. He's able to get to the other side. It's kind of nice for Aokiji to do that for him. But after he does that, he sticks around and he tells Luffy, you're like your grandpa. You're wild, no self-control. And so that obviously makes you think, who is Luffy's grandpa? The first thing I thought of was Gold D. Roger. I don't know. The D, I have no clue. It could be someone totally random. I don't know, there's not much to go off of, but it's so interesting, such a great hook. But maybe it isn't Gold D. Roger because Luffy is aware of what he's kind of referring to, and he himself says with recognition, Gramps. And Aokiji says he owed his grandpa a favor from a long time ago, and he came here to see Luffy and Robin. He didn't intend to fight, but now he says maybe they should die, and that switch is flicked. Aokiji says he knows all about the Straw Hats' adventures, he knows where they've been, what they've done, everything. And he says they're gaining strength, they faced many ruthless villains and they've come out on top. And he says that they're starting to scare him, which is an interesting perspective. It makes you really think, are the Straw Hats villainous to some people? Does he view them as villains? And why? And that's immediately answered because he says that Robin is the primary reason that they're dangerous. He says that bounties don't just reflect the strength of the criminal, but they also reflect the amount of danger they pose to the government. And that's why Robin got her 79 million as a kid. He says that she survived in the underworld and eventually hid herself as part of the crew. And the crew get upset by this and try to defend her, which is obviously very beautiful. But he then says that the crew will find out what a troublesome woman she is. And Robin again, very agitated, very upset, and she's only ever really been this way when people start digging up things about her past, which I just need to know this. I need to know what went down there. Why is she so traumatized by this? Is it connected to she has this death wish? It was kind of resurrected a little bit with the Skypia stuff, the poneglyphs, but is this connected to her past? I think it must be. I think it's all cohesive. It's all great. It's great build-up for her character, and Robin focus, I think this is the perfect time for it to happen. She's been very gradual, a very slow burn for her character, but I think this is the perfect time for Oda to start properly substantiating her. And then it said that every organization she's been a part of has fallen, but the crew are a great way to buck that trend, right? The crew have been known to sail in the face of impossibility. I don't think that'll deter them at all. I do think that they'll be the ones to buck that trend. And Luffy says that we don't care about the past in something very similar to what he said about Nami in Arlong Park. I don't care about Nami's past. All I care about is what is right in front of me, and I trust her. I'm making a judgment of who she is right now. It doesn't matter where she's been. Right now, she's a woman I can trust. That's how he feels about Robin too, and it's so consistent with his character. I love it. 250 chapters later, he's doing the same thing he did back then. So there are many things about Luffy that change: his strength, the way he can be mature about leadership, all sorts of things. But these key aspects of him always stay the same. Robin then uses her power to try to bring Aokiji down with her hands, but he just completely escapes it. She tries to crumble him, but he just emerges. He seems like this monster, and he just towers over all of them. Sanji and Zoro try to attack him, but he just fends both of them off almost easily. And he's using ice, he's wielding ice. And my immediate thought to this is, this guy who can wield ice versus fire. That's something that is just a natural thing to occur in my brain. So I immediately thought, Ace versus Aokiji, is that going to be a thing? Would be cool. Would be surprising if fire didn't fight ice somehow, but maybe that's a red herring, I don't know. But Aokiji freezes them, he just disposes of them easily, and then in this very haunting, one of the most darkest moments in the entire series, he almost embraces Robin and freezes her completely. It's horrifying. It's awful. It's so well illustrated, it's so disturbing. And he's about to kill her by breaking her as she's frozen solid. And he winds up to punch her, and then Luffy swoops in and saves her. Luffy's underneath him, he's about to step on Luffy and step on her head, and then Usopp runs in and grabs her himself. And he gets Luffy, but hey, Luffy can survive being stamped on. Robin cannot in that moment, and Usopp saves her. Chopper and Usopp take Robin away to try to save her, and then Luffy says, "Don't disturb me. It's me versus Aokiji. This is personal." And it's this horrible, delicate situation with what's happening with Robin. Usopp and Chopper are so stressed out. It's so tense. It's so dramatic. It's the most tense I've been while reading the series. One of the most tense moments throughout the entire series, as they're trying to melt Robin out of this, but not damage her, not hurt her. The expressions are so serious and pained and desperate, and it's very hard to watch them in such dire straits. And these negative emotions, seeing them in such dire straits it hits so hard. And Nami and Sanji and Zoro return to the Going Merry as they see Chopper and Usopp doing what they're doing. And Usopp kind of scolds them. He says, "Why did you leave Luffy with him?" And obviously it's because Luffy said, "Leave me with him. Give me a one-on-one." And Sanji said it was Captain's orders. And Usopp says, "Who the hell cares? Luffy's life is more important than his orders. You're a coward." And that coming from Usopp, that about cowardice, the layers to that. But then Sanji grabs Usopp's shirt, slams him against the wall, and he says he said one-on-one. It was Captain's orders. Do you know what that means? This honorable duel between warriors, or do not encroach upon this duel when he says, "Leave it to me." This is exactly what happened with Zoro versus Mihawk on Baratie when Luffy wasn't allowing himself to fight, even though he wanted to. Sanji witnessed that. Sanji is a kindred spirit in that way, and he definitely respects it. Encroaching upon that will, interfering, is disrespectful to the people that are fighting, in this case, Luffy. But the tension here, as Sanji and Usopp are in conflict with one another, they disagree. It's very heated, and there are lives at stake, potentially. The infighting, the tension, the stakes, it hits so hard, because they go through these happy adventures, and it's all uplifting and it's great. But to really nail home these things, I think you need negativity as well. You need the crew to suffer. I don't like seeing it, but it's great writing and it makes the story better than it would be. Because yes, going on this adventure, this long-term, long-scale, 1,000-chapter adventure with this crew, the happy times are going to hit hard, but so are the sad times, and the dramatic times, and the times when things are broken up, and the times where people are not acting like friends, where they fight. That is deeply important. That is deeply important to this story, and I would have been disappointed if Oda didn't do that, but this is a great sign, and I hope Oda does it more in the future. And I didn't really realize until this moment that this negativity is something I want. I want some horrible stuff to happen. It's a horrible thing to say, but I want more conflict between the crewmates, because when you descend, the ascent is going to be that much more powerful, because they will ascend. I'm sure of it. So fights, ideological differences, maybe a crew member leaving, maybe a crew member, I hope not dying, but maybe injured, just negativity. I think negativity is essential to then reconstruct these things and make the positive notes that much more powerful. So that's one thing I hope for with the story. We've got a taste of this negativity and this tension and this discord between the crew members through this fight here, I want more of it, because I want the Ascent to be that much more powerful when they strive past it. Bonds being tested after anger or sadness or loss or defeat or tension or disagreement, it's so powerful. It needs to happen. And Zoro says, cut it out, this isn't the time, which is interesting given that Zoro is someone that very much agrees with the one-on-one idea, mentality, whatever. And the Luffy and Aokiji fight begins. Luffy gets totally frozen in an amazing spread. He just gets frozen completely. And Aokiji says, you got me. You agree to a one-on-one, and that means I cannot attack your crewmates. So that was his word. And then Aokiji says, wait, did you actually think you could win? But it shows that Aokiji has these principles to an extent. He is willing to be a man of his word. He has a sort of code. And so he doesn't kill Luffy, but he leaves him with some words. He says, that woman is much more than you can handle. Robin was born with a brutal personality and cannot change. And we see interspersed with this some desperate scenes of Nami, Usopp, Chopper trying to melt Robin. It's so encapsulating of this horrific moment for the crew. Desperate moments. Sanji and Zoro are rushing to get Luffy, and then Aokiji says, Robin is a great danger to you and your crew. And he says this in a way that seems like almost fated. She's fated to be a danger, to cause horrible stuff to happen, to cause despair. Like this witch, almost. Like this witch of death, this goddess, this bringer of death. And I don't think she is that. I think she is, in some ways, I don't know the specifics, but I feel like she's just a scared girl deep down, a scared woman, afraid to connect, afraid to put herself out there, held back by maybe insecurities of believing what Aokiji is saying. But she's not this horrible danger. I don't believe that for a second. She's just a girl. She's just a woman. And I think that the crew will get through to her. Eventually. I think there will be darkness and pain and sadness and difficulty before it, but at the end of the day, I think she will join the crew fully. And I think they'll embrace her. They already have embraced her. And I said it feels fated, but the crew defy fate at every turn. And Aokiji leaves. He says that he won't kill Luffy because Luffy stopped Sir Crocodile. And he says, forget about that silly message from Smoker. To which I perked up immediately and said, what Smoker? You guys know me and Smoker. What message was he trying to tell Luffy? I need to know. But Zoro and Sanji recover Luffy. Aokiji looks at their log and sees that their next destination is Water 7, the City of Water. And he's surprised at that, and he says they'll be close to Navy headquarters, which is interesting. So it seems like this place that they're headed to, Water 7, the destination for it is very close to military or Navy headquarters, which could lead to a couple of things, a couple of coming togethers. Lots of things going on with the world government, with the Navy, with connections with the crew, with other stuff, Shanks, Ace, Dragon, where the hell's Dragon? Blackbeard, Whitebeard, and then he rides away on his bike after saying that. We have a tiny bit of a time skip, and Chopper says that Luffy and Robin will both be okay. He's very emotional, and we get a scene with Usopp, who is just overwhelmed, and he just feels defeated, it seems like. This is a very sad moment for Usopp, because he says here, he just looks tired, and he says, will all fights be like that from now on? Will we have to face guys like Aokiji all the time because he doesn't feel like he can do it? And he says, all I did was run. I didn't do anything. He's just overwhelmed. And Zoro looks at him and says, just go to sleep. You're tired. But there's a knowing look from him, and you can see Zoro through the little quiet moments, as he has done this whole series, there's a knowing look there, and he can see where Usopp's coming from, and he maybe a bit of concern for his friend there. Maybe a bit of concern and agreement with what he's saying, and so a concern for the crew and what they're about to face. This felt like a marker, like Mihawk in Baratie, like Croc in Alabasta, like NL to an extent in Skypiea. Aokiji completely decimated the crew. He is so beyond them right now, and the idea here for them is to make it so that he's not. And they know it. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's not ambiguous. He destroyed them. So now it's clear what they have to do. Reach that level. If they want to take on more and more and more danger, they have to reach this level. And so that's just a great taster for what's to come in terms of threat and what they have to measure up to. And what's interesting from Usopp here is he says, all I did was run. But what he did through running was very important. He literally saves Robin's life, and he is unable to see that he did something so valuable. So he's not able to give himself that credit. He just sees the negatives. And It's a spiraling, self-perpetuatingly negative mentality that he has here, and it's so human. You understand why he thinks that way, and you can't really fault him for that, but you just want him to see that he did make a difference. He did make an incredible difference. Robin would likely be dead if it wasn't for him. He doesn't see his own value. And the crew kind of recover, and we then cut to the last shot, panel of the whole arc, which is Robin sitting in bed, looking up, brooding, reflecting. Perhaps on her trauma, perhaps on what's to come, perhaps on Aokiji, on her past, whatever. And that's the scene we're left with. And so it makes me think, will the next arc be the arc where Robin truly becomes a Straw Hat? No, really becomes a Straw Hat. Because the crew have accepted her as one, but I don't think that she has accepted herself as part of the crew. Again, there's parallels with her and Nami pre-Arlong Park, but even maybe more of a division for her. I want her to be able to be a part of them and embrace them, because they embraced her. She needs to embrace them back, but she's hung up by these insecurities and this trauma. And I just desperately hope for this woman, this girl, to be able to have friends in the way that she deserves, in the way that she wants. But yeah, that is the arc. That is Long Ring, Long Land. You know, it's not a great arc. It's like I said, one of my least favorite. I would have given it a 5 out of 10, but the last 2 or 3 chapters were unbelievable. From Aokiji's appearance on. It was crazy good. Crazy great stuff for him, for Robin, some stuff for Usopp, for Sanji, the conflict, Zoro. Great stuff. And it builds hype for the next arc. Unbelievably so. Like I said, the tone of the arc was very understandable, but it ramps up right here, and we can see, I'm pretty sure the next arc is going to be hard-hitting, maybe to an extent far beyond anything we've ever seen. Or anything I've seen. You guys have seen it. But yeah, you know what I mean. My expectations for this are kinda sky high, given the build-up to it that Oda has established. But yeah, like I said, the overall tone of the arc was very much necessary post-Skypiea, but now it's ramped up into what I assume will be another big arc, a Robin-centric arc, I hope. It seems like it will be, and I love that. I can't wait for that. Many have told me that the next arc is one of the best. I hope I agree. It definitely has the makings of it. The build-up is immense. And honestly, when I think of Long Ring, Long Land, I just think of all that Aokiji stuff. That stuff was genuinely one of the peaks of the series, and it happens right at the end of all that stuff. It's crazy. But all in all, I think I'd give this arc like a 6 or so, because of how it was elevated towards the end with that Aokiji stuff. Now, as for my top 15 characters, it's almost unchanged from Skypiea, but there is a little bit of a shift, and that is purely just Robin. Robin's gone up a couple of spots, so my order is, well, honorable mentions are Koza, Kalgara, Zeph, Belmare, Nojiko, Konis, Ganfer, and then my top 15 is Sir Crocodile at 15, Mihawk at 14, Hiriluk at 13, Shanks at 12, Robin at 11, Noland at 10, Chopper at 9, Wiper at 8, Sanji at 7, Smoker at 6, Zoro at 5, Nami at 4, Vivi at 3, Usopp at 2, Luffy at 1. I do think there are a few spots in there that are about to change with the introduction of a huge arc, but at the moment, that is what it is, and the only big change is Robin up a couple spots. But Aokiji is super promising. I think he has a lot of potential, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the honorable mentions in the next time I do this. Potentially, who knows? I really want to know more about Ace, Whitebeard, Blackbeard, Doflamingo, of course, lurking in the background. I want more from Shanks, Mihawk, all that stuff that was kind of lurking in the background from Jaya. I want to see more of it soon. And there are a lot of very volatile spots in that top 15 that could shift at a moment's notice, but that's what it is at the moment. So that's all I got, folks. If you would like access to my next review, which I guess would be Water 7, Part 1, I'm assuming that one's going to be in parts if it ends up being as big as it promises to be. We'll see, but Water 7 in some capacity is the next one. If you want to see my review for that right now, you can do so through early access on Patreon. Link is in the description and pinned comment. You can check out my Twitch to go through the read-throughs live with me every Sunday, along with anime reactions, and most Fridays as well. You can check out the Discord server for stuff about my Twitch schedule and changes to that, and video announcements and stuff like that. Follow my Twitter if you'd like to, and as always, leave any comments you'd like to be read in a future video with the hashtag AJPiece if that's something you're into. That aside, that's about it. I can't wait to continue the story, and thank you so much for watching, guys. Many thanks.